In the last travel tips video, we talked about how to plan your trip to Japan. In this video, I'll be sharing my tips on how to navigate the country with ease. My name is Mizhelle, you're watching Tokyo Pass 3, and today I'm here to help you travel around Japan like a pro. Let's get into it. Let's start with the two essentials that will help you get around Japan more easily. So tip number one is to get yourself an IC card. So during your research about traveling to Japan, you may have heard of names like SUICA or PASMO. So these are IC cards or integrated circuit chips. These IC cards are prepaid rechargeable cards that you can use to travel across Japan. That means you can use them for trains, buses, taxis, even ferries or boats. You can also use them for shopping at supermarkets, convenience stores. You can use them for train lockers, pretty much anywhere where you see the sign for the IC card. So usually these IC chips come in a physical, tangible form, but ever since the summer of 2023, there has been a shortage on IC chips, and now they can't issue as many cards as before. And what the train companies advise people is to download the app on their phones. So if you have an iPhone, you can download the app and then later save it to your Apple Wallet. In my case, I have it on my Apple Watch. So you may see in some of my videos that I'm tapping the reader on the ticket gates to go through them. That's actually my SUICA installed on my Apple Watch. Unfortunately, for Android users, I've heard of people having trouble downloading the SUICA app if their phone is not issued in Japan. And unfortunately, the only really way to go about it is to get a physical card, which you can only get at select JR East centers. And these are in Tokyo, Shibuya, Shinagawa, Shinjuku, Ikebukuro. I got it all. When it comes to topping up these cards, if you have the app, you can connect your debit card or your credit card and charge it from there. Or if you're really insistent in using the money, then you can just use a ticket machine from the train station. You can also go to 7-Eleven and use their ATM machine to top up the cards for you. Tip number two, Google Maps is your friend. It is hands down the best way to figure out your route because it tells you which lines you have to get into, which train cars, which platform, even the exit. These are features that I watched get added over the years, and I'm very thankful for because sometimes just getting the exit wrong, especially if it's a very big station, can easily add 30 minutes to 1 hour to your travel time. Now, if you're not very familiar with Google Maps, don't worry, I got you. I'll cover the basics. So this is a sample route. Let's say we are at Yoyogi Park and trying to go to Imperial Palace. Over here, we have different modes of transportation that we can use. If we drive, it's only going to be 20 minutes. If we're using the train, like we have selected here, it's going to be 27 minutes. And then over here, we already have two options for train lines that we can use. We have the Chiyoda line or the Hanzomon line. These colors are the same as the ones that are actually used for the train system, so they're quite easy to follow. And let's say we choose Chiyoda line, so we have to get on Yoyogi Station, and the best way to enter it from the current location is number 3 exit or entrance. And then for the train that we have to get on, it's the 17:55 or the 5:55 p.m. train heading to Kita-Ayase, and it's on platform 2. And if you scroll further down, you get to the boarding position for the fastest exit, so you can either ride train car number 1 or number 3, and you can find these train cars by looking at the floor of the platforms, and you just have to line up there. And then to get to Imperial Palace, you have to get off at Otemachi Station, which is a big station, and exit via C13A. And from there, it's a 5-minute walk, and the cost is going to be 209 yen if you use the IC cards. So the other benefit for using IC cards is to get a slightly lower cost. Now, there might be cases where you actually second guess yourself whether you rode the right train. And in that case, what I usually do is pull up the stops on Google Maps and see if the next station that the train stops at matches whatever is on here. Two other features that I find really important when using Google Maps are the arrive by function and last. Because if you have to get to somewhere for a specific time, like you're catching a concert or a show, for example, or meeting a friend even, then you just put in the time you have to be there, and it will calculate for you what train you have to catch to be there on time. And sometimes, when going out with friends, you forget the time and you need to check what the last train you need to ride to get home. So that's the last function. I would advise getting the train before it just to be safe, because otherwise, if you run out of trains, then your next option is going to be very costly, which is riding a taxi. Now that we're done with the essential tools that you need, let's break down the different modes of transportation that you're likely to use while traveling in Japan. Let's start with tip number 3, get cozy with trains because you're probably going to use them all the time. When it comes to trains, one other thing that you need to pay attention to is its type according to speed. So obviously, we have Shinkansen or bullet trains, which are the fastest and cover a lot of distance. But for travel within a city or sometimes within 2 prefectures, you have the local train and the express train. So you need to pay attention to this because riding an express train when you want to stop at a local train station can be a nightmare, especially when you've passed several stops and you have to go back. It will cost you a lot of time. The other type of train that you need to pay attention to in terms of speed is the limited express. And for this type of train, usually the seats are reserved. So you have to pay a seat fee on top of the regular fare. And you can only do that using the ticket train vending machines or by going through the staff at the train station. Now, if you're so inclined, you might want to look into sightseeing trains as well. They are more expensive, but they offer great value in my opinion. For example, JR has what they call joyful trains, and there's one where it has a foot bath inside the train. There's a Pokemon train. There's one that serves sweets like a cafe. There's also one where you can taste different types of sake. And there's one with a planetarium that I really want to ride because it's Miyazawa Kenji themed and I like Miyazawa Kenji. Yeah, so trains don't have to be daunting. They can be a really great experience too. Tip number 4 is know how to use the buses. They are the next most common type of transportation that you will most likely use in Japan. Now, right off the bat, I want to tell you that buses are not always precise when it comes to times. Unlike trains, they have to share the road with other vehicles, which cause them to be rather late. Sometimes on Google Maps, you can find where the buses are currently at, but it's not always available. You just have to give them a little bit more leeway in terms of waiting for the next bus. When it comes to buses, there are 2 that you need to be familiar with. One is the local bus. Usually, you can just pay your fare with your IC card, SUICA or PASMO when you ride these. But there are some in the countryside where you can't use your IC card. And if this is the case, don't panic. Usually near the entrance, you will find a machine which has a little piece of paper sticking out. Just grab that. That's your seiriken, that's your ticket, and it usually has a single digit or a double digit number on it. How you pay for the fare is you look at the screen close to the driver. It usually has a different ticket numbers on it as well as the corresponding price that you have to pay. So the price goes up the more distance that you cover. When you get off, you just put the ticket along with the cash payment and that's it. These types of buses, you won't really encounter much. They're really more in the countryside, but it's good to know it in advance. When it comes to where to enter, because it really depends on the bus company. Sometimes you enter in the front where near the driver, and sometimes you enter at the back. And really, there's no set rule for that. The only thing you need to observe is probably follow the person before you. The other type of bus that you need to be familiar with is the highway bus. This needs reservation, and there is an English website for it, but there are more buses available in the Japanese counterpart. In any case, I usually use this for covering long distances. So for example, from Tokyo to Mount Fuji, yes, one of the cheaper ways to get there is usually by bus. Night buses also fall under this category because you have to reserve it before you can actually get on. You have to show your voucher and stuff like that. Do I recommend them? Maybe if you're young, not maybe at my age when my bones are tired and my muscles are weak. Yeah, it's very tiring to go on a night bus. But the advantage is you get to your destination first thing in the morning. Tip number 5 is taxis are very expensive. Use them only when you really need to. In my case, I use taxis when I miss my last train or I miss my last bus. It's not often, but I sometimes do. Usually I would get to the nearest station possible and try to hail a cab from there. Especially after train hours, you will find taxis and also people already lined up right outside the station. So hailing one is not that difficult, but you do have to wait for a while if the queue is long. So one other advice I can give you is to use the Go app or the DD app, which Google recommends and also tells you like around how much the fare is for your ride. I haven't used DD, but I have used Go several times. It's in English. If your iPhone setting is in English, it's pretty much straightforward. One other case I would recommend a taxi is, for example, there is a long walking distance to the station and it's raining heavily and you're with your friends, then you can just divide the fare among you and it's a cheaper way and a safer way to get to the station. If you go to the countryside, it is most likely that the public transportation options are few and far in between. You can also hire a private taxi or a private charger to do your sightseeing. I used this when I went to Tokushima some years ago, and in that place, there's really not much public transportation available, and the roads are very tricky because they're kune-kune, like this. The English word doesn't come up right now. You can book these on online travel agencies like Veltra, Klook, Viator. These are just some of the companies that are out there. And if you are fluent in Japanese, you can also call the taxi company directly. I almost forgot about this, but there is a tip number 6, which is you can use rental bicycle and electric kickboards in major cities. The most common companies for these are Docomo Bike Share, Hello Cycling, and what is the other one? Loop, which is a relatively new company. To use them, you usually have to get an app and register an account. And once you open the app, it will show you the many different ports that they have in the city. From there, you choose the port that you like, and then you reserve the bike, and then you just have to go there, maybe input a number or read a QR code, and then you can use it. There's no human contact involved. Electric kickboards are a different story though, because they are considered two-wheeled vehicles in Japan, and you need a license to ride these, and you can only ride on the car roads and not on the pedestrian lanes, so it is a bit scary. Now that we've covered the basic modes of transportation, let's talk about luggage, because you will most likely deal with them as you travel around the country. So tip number 7 is to store them in lockers. You can find lockers of different sizes at many, I'd say most train stations in Japan, and some of them are coin operated, and some of them you can use your PASMO or SUICA to store your luggage. One other luggage service that I use is the Yamato Kuroneko luggage service, wherein you send your luggage to your next destination. For example, when I went to Kyushu a few weeks ago, on my last day, I had to check out of my hotel at 10 a.m., but I still had a full day of exploration because my flight was at night. I used this service to forward my bag home. It takes 2 days for your bag to arrive at your chosen destination, so just make sure you don't have essentials in there like chargers, camera equipment, even your computer. And finally, my last tip for this video also relates to something that you have to lug around, and that's trash. Tip number 8 is know where to throw your trash. One of the things that you would immediately notice in Japan is the lack of trash bins, and there's a good reason for that. In 1995, there were a series of domestic terror attacks involving sarin gas. How do you pronounce it in English? Sarin? Sarin gas. Sarin. It sounds weird. I'll just use poisonous gas. So these poisonous gases were stored in bags and were thrown in the trash, so people did not notice them immediately. And unfortunately, this resulted in a lot of victims. If you want to read about it, Murakami Haruki actually has a nonfiction book wherein he interviewed both the victims and the perpetrators. It really is a very interesting book. I'm surprised that it's not as well known as his other works. In any case, because of these series of terror attacks, which also involve the use of trash cans, the government has made it a point to limit the number so that these types of terror attacks won't happen again. That's also why you see in train stations, the trash bins are transparent so you can see what's inside. And that's also why you hear announcements on trains saying that if you see like a suspicious luggage anywhere, tell the staff immediately. So, where do you throw your trash? Going back to the main point. 2 most common places you can find them are convenience stores and train stations. Fortunately, there is really no other solution other than to keep your trash in your bag and just throw them away when you find a trash bin at the train station or at the convenience store. Japan is mindful of separating trash, so please be mindful of where you throw different types of trash. There are some cases where it's hard to determine what type of trash you're actually holding, especially between paper and plastic. Sometimes the material is very confusing. But one of the things I love about Japan is that they do tell you what type of trash it is in the packaging. There is a sign for kami or paper and pura or plastic, whatever the packaging is. You don't have to memorize these 2 characters. You can use Google Translate if you want to, but maybe you can just memorize the fact that if it's 2 characters, it's most likely plastic. Of course, if it's bottle or can, we can distinguish a little bit better between those 2, so you don't really need to use Google Translate on that. Navigating Japan's public transportation can be tricky, but it is doable. It just needs a little bit of getting used to and some prior knowledge. But what about food? How do you make sure that you get the most bang out of your buck? What are the things that you need to pay attention to? Those are some of the topics that we'll cover in the next video. So if you want to watch that, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it when it comes out. It has been a weird day. That's why I'm all giggly and stuff. This has been Mizhelle for Tokyo Pass 3. And if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments. I'll see you in the next video. Have a nice day. Bye!